So then, guys, we are going to be talking about an F1 season that, on the face of it, wasn't that big, wasn't that special. We're going to be talking about a season that actually, when you start digging into it and digging into the races, there was a lot more than meets the eye. And we're only even going to scratch the surface of what happened. But you're going to see that this was a season that was full of drama that has, for a large portion of time, been pretty much buried in its drama. Apart from a couple of families and also a film that came out um, about the season that was released last year, and that is the 1982 Formula One season. Now, the winner of this season was the Keke Rosberg, who, as you can see, and as you can see by myself, I think he's got quite good vibes going on. Yeah, the Tash. We love a driver with a Tash. Nigel Mansell, yeah, absolutely, and Clay Rigazzoni as well. We love a driver with a Tash. Well, I do anyway. But as you can see by his stats, wasn't exactly like a walkover. He won one race that season in about 15 races and somehow won the title. Now, on the face of it, you could look at that and go, okay, was it a confusing season? Was it a case where everyone was winning and so no one was really standing out? Maybe that was a bit confusing. Maybe it was exciting. I don't know what you might think of it. Make of it what you will. In fact, if you have any comments on what your thoughts are on the fact that the world champion was a guy who only won one race, feel free to put the comments down in the place below. But actually, this was a very, very dramatic season, and some of them for the right reasons, some for the wrong reasons. And in a sense, Keke Rosberg was not the main character in the F1 season. Very much like in terms of 2021, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton, who were fighting out for the title, were the main characters in that season. You'd almost assume that the guy that won the world championship would at least be one of the main characters. But Keke wasn't. And the reason is that two people that were probably the main characters in this season, in what shaped this season, in terms of drivers, was actually these two: Didier Pironi and Gilles Villeneuve. Now, these two were not just title contenders when they were driving around, but in the 1982 season, they were teammates. Now, if anyone knows the times of Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton, the times of Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber, the times of Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, we could go on. You know that a rivalry between teammates can get a little bit spicy and a little bit frosty. Two weird words to use at the same time, spicy and frosty, but that's how it could be. And to a certain extent, this is what happened with these two drivers too. Gilles and Didier. Well, you're about to see what was about to happen. But let's get into some detail on these drivers before we go into what was going on, so that you guys get an idea and a sense of the two characters at play. Now, the first one we're going to talk about is Gilles himself. Good-looking guy, and you might recognise the name. Of course you do. Brilliant driver. Now, he was also very charismatic. He was the Joker. He had this really interesting, outgoing personality where he seemed to get on with everyone, and everyone liked him, and he was always having a little bit of a laugh and a little bit of a joke. It was a case of before he got into the car, or when he wasn't in the car, he wasn't taking life too seriously. He wasn't really messing around too much. It was a joy. Life was a joy for him, and that was the way in which he was. But the fact is, that was him outgoing. He appeared outgoing, but on the inside, he was a kind hearted man. He was someone who had a stable life. He was appreciated. Yes, not always appreciated. His son Jacques Villeneuve struggled with him a bit. That might have been just down to the fact of the lifestyle, the working lifestyle that they were having. But on the whole, Gilles Villeneuve was liked by everybody as well. He was also very unlucky. Now, that seems like a strange term to use for Gilles Villeneuve, and probably the best way to describe it is actually to describe the stats of Villeneuve's racing career when he was in Formula One. Now, he raced for 5 seasons. In those 5 seasons, he raced in 63 races in total. In those 63 races, he got 5 wins, 5 race wins, 1 race win a season. Now, that doesn't sound like it's that special. I mean, okay, it's more special than me because I'm not going to get a Formula 1 race win, but 63 races, 5 wins, not exactly championship material. But then there comes the other stat that out of those 63 races, he had 26 retirements. And a lot of them were mechanical retirements. He was in a terrible car that just always broke down. The amount of times that he would be leading a race only to break down, or challenging for a lead just to break down. And it was a very, very difficult time. It was even in the 1980 season, I believe it was, when he finished second in the championship, despite the fact that he retired in about 7 races. He was an incredibly unlucky guy not to have done better than he already did. But he was a brilliant driver. He was one of those people where you look at the stats and you look at the driver on the track when you see the videos, and they didn't seem to pair up. On the one hand, you got the stats where they don't seem to be that good of a driver. And then on the other hand, you see the video and they seem like an absolutely epic driver. And the fact is that the videos were the thing that was telling the full story, not the stats. And the other thing to mention about his name, he is a Canadian F1 icon. To the point where the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal is held at the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. I don't think he was. I think he was still alive when they named the track in his honour, the Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. He is an absolute sporting Canadian megastar, and still considered that way today. Now, how about the other guy, Didier Pironi? Well, this guy was pretty much the opposite of Gilles. He was a more reserved guy. So he was the quiet kid, right? Didn't really hear too much from him, but he was methodical. He was the long-term thinker. You could almost call him sly. I mean, to give you an idea, now these guys are both at Ferrari, which is a very special team to drive for. And Gilles had found a place in Ferrari's hearts. To the point where the owner of Ferrari at the time, Enzo Ferrari, as in the guy that started the team, referred to Gilles Villeneuve, this Canadian scrapper, referred to him as his adopted son. Enzo adored Gilles. What did Didier Pironi do? He made one of the Ferrari bigwigs the best man at his wedding. He did things to try and get some support. Now, people could say it split the team, but the main thing was that he was trying to get himself a spot where he was seen as just as important to Ferrari as what Gilles was. Respect to him for that. And he was up and coming. He'd won Le Mans with Renault. He was the French wonder kid. In fact, him and Prost came into Formula One around the same time. And Pironi was the one that actually got the most of the headlines to start off with when it came to the next up and coming French driver, not Alain Prost. Alain Prost is the professor now, so and 4 titles. So you can imagine how well Pironi was received in the paddock. They saw him as the next big thing. In a sense, the next Michael Schumacher before Michael Schumacher had even started. That sort of thing. So those are the 2 drivers. But now we're going to go into the season, and basically, it was about 5 rounds in when the drama actually started. And we can't really talk about what happened with the drama without talking about the reason for the drama. And the reason for it was to do with probably the one subject I actually dislike talking about in Formula One, but we have to talk about it here, which is the politics of Formula One. Yes, Bernie Ecclestone's face is here. And the reason is that he was a central figure in what was known as the Fokker-Pfizer War. Now, the Fokker-Pfizer War is a very, very, very laborious, time-consuming, frustrating political thing, but we're going to talk about it as briefly as we possibly can. Now, Fokker and Pfizer are 2 different entities. This isn't like one long term. These were 2 arrangements. Now, Pfizer stands for the Fédération Internationale de Sport Automobile, and Fokker, the Formula One Constructors Association. Now, you can see the Pfizer is in French, the Fokker in English. Now, what that was basically the FOCA, the Fokker, was set up by Bernie Ecclestone to represent the British constructors who were struggling with money-wise and things like that, right? And Pfizer was not the aristocrats, because they all were rich people to a certain extent, but they were the works teams, the ones that had, they were the Renaults, the Ferraris, the ones that, pretty much had all the money and resources to get things done quickly, to get things done sharpish, right? They had the big units, the big engines, all this sort of thing. And the British Constructors Association had to do things a little bit differently to compete. So you had 2 sets of teams doing different things to compete. Now, for the Pfizer, it was all, like I say, it was all about the big engines, the big power. And for the FOCA, it was about doing clever things to make their cars lighter whilst also being legal so that they can compete. Because, lighter car, faster car, right? And here you had, it was pretty much 70, well, I don't know what the percentages are for 14 cars and 20 cars, but they both had a huge stake. We weren't talking about a governing body that was overseeing 4 or 6 cars. These were hefty. It was a full-on battle, and no one was going to budge. And before the San Marino Grand Prix, the 5th race, there was a problem. So the FOCA teams, they were penalised for opening round results when it came to water tanks and everything like that. Now, The situation around water tanks has been very well publicised, but in a sense, it was a clever water tank that was emptied during the race and then filled up after the race. So it appeared like the cars were heavier than they actually were in the race. So they were getting sneaky performance upgrades. Does that make sense? And it was a bit of a court hearing that there was these things. And in terms of the FOCA, they reacted to it by going, well, hold on, if you're going to penalise us with courts and everything like that, then surely we need to delay the season. We need to delay everything so that we get a chance to get our ducks in order, get everything in a row, get everything aligned. Please, can we have the season postponed so that we can all get these regulation changes sorted and everything like that? FISA, the rich boys who could change things at a moment's notice, said no. What did the FOCA do? They boycotted the San Marino Grand Prix. What did that mean? Well, that meant that more than 50% of the cars didn't race in the San Marino Grand Prix. It felt a little bit dodgy. It felt like a non-race. And as a result, this is what happened. The San Marino Grand Prix. Now, this is a shot from the San Marino Grand Prix, the two Ferrari drivers, and they are actually battling for the lead. And you're probably thinking, it was it most exciting race of all time. And a lot of the fans that were watching the race clearly thought so too. A lot of the a lot of the interviews with the drivers gave over the impression that this was the most exciting race of them all. But interestingly, there was a comment from Alan Prost that was also competing in this race, also one of the 14 cars, that started to give an impression that actually all was not as it seems. You see, the agreement was that yes, a show would be put on for the fans and excitement, but not for the entirety. They had to ensure in the wake of poor reliability that they all got through, so they weren't going to push it. An agreement was made between all the drivers that after a certain lap, everything was all going to be good. The agreement didn't get followed. You see, they were racing up until I think it was lap 37, I want to say, something like that, right? And that was when the race, the genuine race, was meant to end. There was still going to be 20 more laps, but the excitement was to end, basically. And to a certain extent, the teams were on board with it. In fact, Ferrari themselves, whilst their drivers were 1 and 2, put out boards while Gilles Villeneuve was in first and Didier Pironi was in second to basically slow the drivers down, get them to save fuel, get them to relax a little bit. And they put out the slow pit stop boards to say so. Now, Gilles Villeneuve read those signs as if to go, right, that's it, this is the order. Almost it's a procession. We're going to give over the impression it's a race, but this is it. Results are final. Didier Pironi in second read that board to say, don't take too many risks, but still challenge the lead if you need to. And as a result, they did carry on battling for the lead. And there's a little bit of aggression between the two of them, but it gave over the impression of an exciting race. In fact, you could almost say it was similar to the duel in the desert between Rosberg and Hamilton in 2014. That was the levels of excitement we were talking about here. People were up on their feet at the excitement of the racing. And when the drivers came out, when Gilles Villeneuve lost to Pironi in this race, you could tell from Gilles Villeneuve his reaction that he didn't just feel like he'd lost out. He felt like he'd been cheated, that he'd been stabbed behind the back. He looked hurt. And as a result, the teammates became rivals straight away. Now, teammates becoming rivals can be an exciting thing. We've spoken about the rivalries between teammates, and sometimes it allows both drivers to get better. Well, this wasn't the case for Gilles and Didier. See, the next race, Gilles was giving over this impression that he absolutely wanted to qualify ahead of Pironi no matter what it cost. Really pushing. He did a lap and he was still pushing. That next race that he was qualifying for was Zolder. And whilst he was in the qualifying, he caught John Watson's car. And this was the result. This crash. It's a heavy crash. It already looks like a bad crash. But can you see that white in the centre of the picture? That's not part of the car. That in white is Gilles. That is Gilles Villeneuve during the crash being thrown out of his car and landing in a fence on the opposite side of the track. Gilles Villeneuve was pronounced dead at 9 p.m. that evening with a fractured neck. Now, some say he was pushing too much. And there is a lot of people who give over an impression that Didier's actions in the previous race ignited an emotion in Gilles that didn't get extinguished. And as a result, Formula One lost a legend. Lost a shining star. Canada lost a sporting icon. We all lost a Formula One driver. Now, as gloomy and grumpy as we're about to say, this sounds like the most callous phrase to ever use, but it's a phrase that gets used so much in Formula One that the show must go on. The sport must go on. And as a result, that's what happened. And speaking in terms of the facts, with Gilles no longer competing, Didier had the chance to win the title for himself. Clear ground, fresh ground, no one could compete with him. Well, at the German Grand Prix, 6 rounds later, Pironi crashed. Now, the first thing to say is this crash didn't end Pironi's life, but it did end his career. Because he was no longer in a state, I think, so he'd broken both of his legs. He had to have 30 operations on his legs to get them even close to mobile. He was now in no longer a fit state to drive a Formula One car, so it still was a tragedy. And a double tragedy because he couldn't drive in Formula One, but he still needed that competitiveness. He went into powerboats and died in powerboat racing. He lost his life. This was a sad time where in one season we had not lost not one but two future legends future Formula One icons. 2 Formula One icons, full stop. They were held in such high regard by the people around them and the people that worked with them. And they had the ability to divide, which actually is one of the telltale signs of a legend, that they divide opinion about themselves. How many times do we have opinions divided about Schumacher and about Hamilton and about Verstappen and about Vettel? Even louder. Opinions get split, right? And we lost 2 shining lights in Formula One. 2 people that should have been up there on the stats. And I think what this shows more than anything else is that Formula One has this tendency in its 50 plus years, in fact, no, 70 plus years of racing, that so many seasons have happened that it's very easy to hide down into the, and just look at the stats, right? And it's fair to look at the stats. Sometimes the stats will tell you things, that are amazing and incredible. How amazing is it that we have not one but 2 drivers that have won the World Championship 7 times? How amazing is it that we have a Formula One driver who, at the age of 22, I think it is, for Max Verstappen, and has as many wins as Ayrton Senna. In fact, more than Ayrton Senna. Right? The stats can give over these important things, but the numbers hide the stories. See, 1982, like I said at the start, it was one of those seasons that didn't seem that big, and it turned out it was huge for all the wrong reasons. But for all the right reasons, how wonderful is it that we get to celebrate these heroes, celebrate these drivers, look into their lives, and how amazing is it that we have families that are willing to open up about their lives. And their legacy was such, in a way, that Didier Pironi's girlfriend, when pregnant with twins, named both of the children Didier and Gilles in honor of those 2 men who were, in their own way, amazing, had the desire to win, and just a special place in people's hearts. It's special. And for that, this is what we thank Formula One for providing us with these stories. Yes, not all of them are positive. Some of them are tragic. But we also have stories that are uplifting. Having a driver who won the World Championship despite winning only 1 race, as we mentioned at the start. And that's why, out of all of them, we have to think about Keke. Going back to Keke, throughout all the drama, he was one of the Formula One drivers to have the resilience to complete the season, alongside Alain Prost, alongside other drivers. And he was the one that not only had the resilience, but still the desire to win the World Championship. And that's why, despite the fact that he probably wasn't the leading light of the 1982 season, Keke Rosberg was a formidable driver. Underestimate him at your peril. And so thank you, Formula One, for providing us these strong characters. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed, or at least were intrigued by the story, or part of the story of the 1982 Formula One season. So what are we going to be doing for our F1 content for the future? Well, we see a lot of content. I'm sure you see a lot of content from Formula One creators about drivers, about maybe seasons, maybe about certain events, certain situations. The Indy of 2005 comes up a lot. But have you ever had a creator that's going to talk about every track that has ever been raced in Formula One? Well, you do now, because that is exactly what we are going to do. I have with me a list of all the Formula One tracks that have ever been raced. Firstly, are you like me? Is your mind boggled by the amount of tracks that we have raced at? This covers pretty much 6 of the 7 continents as well, which is incredible. And we are basically going to randomize it. Next week's stream will be about the track that gets chosen on this wheel of names, on this wheel of tracks. It's going to be an intriguing one. So, let's see what race or what circuit we're going to get first. Here we go. What are we going to get first? We are getting the Detroit Street Circuit. So, guys, for the Detroit Street Circuit, next week, we will be doing a piece on the Detroit Grand Prix, the Detroit Street Circuit. I know from my memory that this one is probably going to be a bit of a spicy one for all the wrong reasons, but I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it. So, stay tuned to the YouTube channel, to the Twitch channel, for our piece on the history and the stories and the drama of the Detroit Street Circuit.